The first thing I heard was an engine coming fast down my dirt lane. I was on my knees, scraping loose soil away from the spiked strip I had buried minutes earlier, when Denise Whitaker's SUV appeared beyond the pasture fence. She had driven through my farm again and again after I told her to stop. This time, I had finally done something reckless enough to stop her. Then another vehicle appeared between us, and my stomach dropped. What would you have done in my place? To understand why I was digging that thing back up before anyone reached it, we need to go back 3 weeks. 3 weeks earlier, I was dragging a box blade behind my tractor along the eastern lane of our 126-acre Tennessee farm, repairing washouts before the next heavy rain. My name is Mason Reed. I repair agricultural equipment for a living, so when something starts wearing wrong, I notice patterns. That morning, the pattern was tire tracks. Fresh crossover tires ran straight through the gravel I had graded the evening before. The lane was not a county road. It connected our hay field and equipment shed to the county road, and my family had maintained it for decades. I checked the trail camera mounted near the cattle fence. At 7:18 that morning, a silver SUV rolled past. Denise Whitaker was driving. Denise was president of Briar Glen, the homeowners association bordering our eastern property line. I knew her well enough to wave at the grocery store, but not well enough to understand why she was using my farm as a shortcut. 2 mornings later, I heard her SUV before I saw it. I parked the tractor across my equipment entrance, leaving plenty of room for her to stop. Denise lowered her window. "Morning, Mason." "Denise, this is private property. You cannot keep cutting through here." She looked genuinely surprised. "This road has been used by Briar Glen for years. It is our secondary access. It is my farm lane. Then you should check the subdivision records." She said it without raising her voice, which bothered me more than an argument would have. I let her turn around, then drove directly home and pulled the deed from our fireproof document box. Vanessa, my wife, found me at the kitchen table, tracing the property description with my finger. There was no recorded Briar Glen easement listed in the deed. "Do not assume that settles everything," she said. Vanessa was a county civil engineer, and she had spent enough time around plats and right-of-way questions to know better than I did. Find out what she thinks gives them access. I started with something simpler. I photographed the tire tracks, saved the camera footage, mounted a private farm road sign beside the entrance, and replaced the old gate latch with a keyed padlock. That evening I tested it twice before heading inside. At 7:21 the next morning, my camera sent another motion alert. Denise's silver SUV was already halfway across my farm. I drove to the gate expecting to find a cut chain. The chain was intact. The padlock was intact. Even the gate showed no damage. I pulled up the recording and watched Denise stop outside the gate, step from her SUV, walk directly to my lock, and open it with a key. I changed the lock that afternoon and kept the old cylinder in a plastic evidence bag instead of throwing it into my workbench drawer. Then I moved a second camera 20 yards deeper into the pasture, angled so anyone opening the gate would be recorded from the front. For 2 days, nothing happened. On Thursday morning, a landscaping truck carrying Briar Glen logos opened the gate with another key and drove straight through. Denise followed 12 minutes later. I was waiting near the equipment shed when she came around the bend. She stopped before I had to signal her. "You changed the lock," she said, and somebody handed out the new key. Her expression shifted. "Mason, you are treating a road access issue like somebody is sneaking into your barn." She reached into a leather folder and handed me a photocopy of an old subdivision plat. A road line extended from Briar Glen toward my eastern boundary and appeared to line up with my dirt lane. "There," she said. "Secondary access." I studied the page, but refused to pretend I understood every notation. "This does not explain your key. The association has maintained access for years." She took the plat back and drove away the way she had entered. That evening, Vanessa walked the boundary with me. Instead of arguing about the map, she crouched near an orange survey stake 50 feet from the gate. Fresh gray gravel had been spread from Briar Glen's side almost to our property line. Farther downhill, a recently reshaped drainage swale pointed runoff toward the low shoulder of my lane. Vanessa stood and brushed dirt from her hands. "They have been doing work back here." I went through my father's old farm files that night and found years of invoices for crushed limestone, grading, culvert repairs, and ditch work on our lane, all paid by the Reed family. I photographed every receipt. The next morning, I sent Denise and the Briar Glen board a written notice stating that I did not consent to routine vehicle traffic across the farm. Denise answered residents before she answered me. By lunch, a neighbor forwarded me her association email describing my gate as the sudden closure of a long-used secondary safety connection. That afternoon, 3 Briar Glen vehicles came through within 40 minutes. I did not confront them. I recorded license plates, times, and direction of travel. Vanessa watched me enter everything into a notebook. They are building a story, she said. The next morning, a certified envelope arrived from an attorney representing Briar Glen. The letter did not claim they had a recorded easement. It said the association was evaluating rights arising from historical use and warned me against interfering with access while the issue was reviewed. Then one sentence stopped me cold. Briar Glen was asserting that continued use of my lane might be legally protected even without an easement appearing in my deed. I called a property attorney that afternoon. He did not tell me Briar Glen was right, but he did tell me something I hated hearing. A missing recorded easement did not automatically end every possible access claim. Do not give them new facts, he said. Document what is happening and do not improvise. For 4 days, I followed the first half of that advice perfectly. I built a spreadsheet from my camera timestamps and found Denise crossing almost every weekday between 7:05 and 7:30 in the morning. That did not look like emergency access. It looked like a commute. Then I stopped a delivery van near the equipment shed. The driver apologized and showed me the instructions on his phone. The note told him to use the Briar Glen rear farm road. Who gave you that? I asked. Customer delivery instructions. The address belonged to a Briar Glen homeowner. Denise had not just normalized the route for herself. The neighborhood was beginning to treat my lane like a street. I photographed the delivery instructions with the driver's permission and sent them to my attorney. His reply was simple. Keep documenting. The next morning, Denise came through again. I met her beside the hay field instead of blocking the lane. Your residents are directing commercial deliveries across my property now. She folded her arms. Because this connection has existed for years, I gave your board written notice. And our attorney responded. You cannot erase historical use with a sign, Mason. You are using it every morning because it saves you time. For the first time, irritation cracked her calm expression. You do not get to decide what qualifies as legitimate access while the rights are disputed. She drove away before I could answer. I stood in the dust feeling like every reasonable thing I had tried had become another piece of paper nobody respected. That was when I made the decision Vanessa would later call the dumbest mechanical solution I had ever applied to a legal problem. In my equipment building, I had commercially manufactured tire deflation equipment left from a controlled yard job. I carried one section to an interior stretch of the lane, well inside the acreage shown on my deed. I convinced myself that because the ground was mine, the answer was mine too. Instead of leaving the device visible, I settled it into a shallow depression and brushed loose dirt across it so Denise would not simply steer around it. I had barely finished when an engine sounded from the county road end. I expected the silver SUV. Then a white farm supply pickup rounded the distant bend, and I realized the spikes did not know whose tires I was angry at. I ran for the tractor because it was closer than the pickup. I swung onto the lane, stopped sideways well before the concealed strip, and raised both hands until the farm supply driver braked. Road problem, I called. Give me 5 minutes. He backed into the hayfield entrance while I grabbed a shovel and uncovered what I had buried. The steel assembly looked different once I imagined somebody innocent reaching it first. I pulled it out, carried it to the equipment building, and locked it away. No tire had touched it. Nobody had been hurt. That did not make the decision disappear. Vanessa came home while I was smoothing the disturbed dirt. She saw the rectangular cut in the lane, then saw the equipment through the open building door. Tell me you did not bury that. I did not answer quickly enough. She stared at me. Mason, you have an access dispute. That does not mean you get to create a hidden road hazard. I took it out. Good. Now call your attorney before somebody else tells him first. I did. I explained exactly what I had installed, where I had placed it, and that I had removed it before any vehicle reached it. His silence lasted several seconds. Do not reinstall anything concealed, he said. Preserve photographs, dates, and the equipment. If this dispute becomes litigation, pretending it never happened will hurt you worse. By evening, Denise already knew something had happened. She had apparently noticed the fresh rectangular disturbance during another pass near the boundary. At the next Briar Glen meeting, she displayed photographs of the patched dirt and told residents I had been placing tire deflation equipment on a route their families used. She did not claim anyone had been injured. She did not need to. A homeowner forwarded me the meeting recording. Denise sounded measured, almost concerned. "Whatever our disagreement over access," she said, "this cannot become a safety contest." For the first time, I hated that I agreed with her. My attorney told me the spike strip decision had given Briar Glen something valuable, a way to make my behavior the story instead of their repeated crossings. That night, Vanessa spread Denise's photocopied subdivision plat across our kitchen table. She compared the symbols along Briar Glen's rear street with the line extending toward our farm, then pulled a ruler across the boundary markings. "Mason, look at where the dedicated right-of-way stops." I leaned closer. The subdivision street ended before our property line. Beyond it, the line toward my dirt lane was drawn differently. Vanessa tapped it once. "I do not think this map says what Denise has been telling everyone it says." Vanessa and I spent the next evening separating what the plat actually showed from what Denise had been saying it showed. The dedicated Briar Glen right-of-way ended short of our boundary. The line beyond it existed on the drawing, but it was not labeled the same way as the subdivision street. My attorney warned me not to call that proof by itself, so I gave him everything else we had already collected. My father's gravel invoices, culvert receipts, the trail camera timeline, my written no permission notice, Denise's association email, and the delivery instructions calling my lane the Briar Glen Rear Farm Road. He sent Briar Glen a formal demand to stop routine crossings while the access claim was being resolved. For 3 days, my cameras recorded nobody. Then Denise called me. Her voice was different. "We should solve this without spending $20,000 proving who can drive over a strip of gravel." We met with counsel present. Denise offered compensation for a formal easement that would give Briar Glen controlled access across the farm. I almost laughed from relief. Instead, I asked why the association would buy access it already claimed to possess. "Because certainty has value," she said. That was a good answer. Better than I expected. Vanessa and I discussed the proposal that night. If the terms protected our farming operations and shifted maintenance costs to Briar Glen, I was willing to consider it. Then my attorney sent me the draft. One clause described Briar Glen's previous crossings as historic authorized use. I read those 3 words twice. Signing them would not merely create future access. It could help Denise characterize the past in exactly the way we disputed. I rejected the clause. Denise refused to remove it. The negotiation ended within 24 hours. That should have been the bad news. Vanessa found something worse. She compared the fresh drainage swale we had seen near the boundary with Briar Glen's road layout and explained that the neighborhood's rear section had limited turnaround space and drainage constraints. A legitimate secondary connection through my lane could spare the association from a much more expensive internal infrastructure solution. Suddenly, Denise's persistence made financial sense. She was not fighting over a convenient shortcut alone. She was fighting over who would absorb the cost of Briar Glen's problem. At 7:14 the next morning, my phone received a trail camera alert. Denise's silver SUV entered the frame, crossed the boundary, and slowed almost to walking speed directly in front of the camera. She looked toward the lens, then continued down my lane as if she wanted the crossing recorded. The way Denise slowed for my camera bothered me more than if she had accelerated past it. I pulled every timestamp into one timeline and laid it beside the dates of Briar Glen's emails, gravel work, attorney letter, and easement negotiations. Vanessa noticed the pattern first. Denise's crossings became more deliberate after I challenged access, not less. Contractors had followed the route. Residents had been told it was a secondary connection. Delivery instructions had started calling it a rear farm road. Fresh gravel had appeared near the boundary. Now Denise was making sure my own camera preserved her continued use. She is creating a history while arguing that history already exists, I said. Vanessa nodded. Maybe, but do not claim intent you cannot prove. Stick to what the records show. That distinction changed everything. I had been trying to physically stop vehicles. Denise was building facts she could point to later. My spike strip mistake suddenly looked even worse because another reckless move could hand her the strongest evidence in the dispute. I called my attorney and told him I wanted every photograph and note about the concealed device preserved with the rest of the file. No hiding it. No pretending I had not. Lost my temper. Then I changed the farm itself, but this time carefully. On the interior section where our ownership was not disputed, I installed a visible locked access barrier, reflective private property signs, and a camera aimed directly at approaching traffic. Nothing concealed. Nothing designed to damage a vehicle. Vanessa walked the boundary with me again and pointed out something I had overlooked when I was focused on tire tracks. Briar Glen's constructed street, its drainage work, and my farm lane were three different physical systems. Even if Denise could prove people had crossed the property before, that did not automatically make my gravel lane a subdivision street capable of serving whatever traffic the HOA wanted. Width, drainage, maintenance, and the actual boundary still mattered. 2 days later, Denise sent notice through council that Briar Glen intended to bring a contractor to inspect what it called the existing access connection. My attorney told them entry onto Reed property was not authorized while the claim remained disputed. Denise answered that the association would inspect from wherever it believed it possessed access rights. At 9:06 the next morning, my camera alert sounded. Denise's silver SUV appeared at the Briar Glen end of the lane. Behind her came a survey contractor's pickup and another association vehicle. I walked toward the visible barrier with my phone recording, but I never touched the lock. Denise had spent weeks waiting for me to lose control again. This time, I intended to find out what happened when I refused. Denise stopped 30 feet from the barrier and stepped out carrying the same leather folder she had shown me weeks earlier. The contractor stayed beside his pickup. I stayed on my side of the gate with my phone recording. "This does not need to become another spectacle," Denise said. "Sign the easement. Briar Glen pays you. We establish maintenance terms, and everybody moves on." For a second, she sounded less like an HOA president and more like someone trying to keep a problem from getting worse. "I will discuss future access," I said. "I will not sign language saying the past use was authorized." Denise glanced toward the contractor. "Our position is that authorization is unnecessary because the right already exists." "Then why pay me for it?" "Because settlement buys certainty, Mason." I already explained that. She was right about that much, and I refused to pretend otherwise. The contractor asked whether he could cross the barrier to take measurements. Denise answered before I could. "We maintain that this is an existing access." I pulled the written notice from my folder. "And you received this before several of the crossings my cameras recorded." Denise barely looked at it. "Notice does not extinguish a right if the right exists." Again, she had an answer. That was what made her dangerous. I did not need to beat her in an argument beside a dirt road. I needed the complete record to survive scrutiny. My attorney already had the trail camera chronology, maintenance invoices, subdivision plat, contractor instructions, Denise's resident email, the failed easement draft, photographs of the gravel work, and my full account of the spike strip incident. I had finally stopped hiding the evidence that embarrassed me and started trusting the evidence that mattered. Vanessa arrived from the farmhouse and walked toward the boundary markers, keeping clear of the dispute. She pointed to the end of Briar Glen's constructed pavement, then the drainage swale, then my gravel lane. "Those do not become one road just because they line up on a drawing," she said. The contractor studied the ground and admitted he could not survey beyond the barrier without resolving permission or access authority first. Denise's composure tightened. She closed her folder. "Then council can handle it." She returned to her SUV and backed away. I thought she was leaving. Instead, she lowered her window. "Tomorrow morning, Mason, I am using the route I have always used. You can record every second." Then she drove back toward Briar Glen. I looked down at the repaired patch of dirt where the spike strip had once been buried. Tomorrow, Denise was coming straight for that exact stretch of road. At 7:12 the next morning, Denise's silver SUV appeared beyond the Briar Glen boundary exactly as promised. I was already beside the visible barrier with my phone recording. Vanessa stood farther back near the pasture fence. The repaired patch where I had buried the spike strip 3 weeks earlier lay smooth beneath fresh gravel. Nothing was hidden there now. Denise rolled forward until her bumper was several feet from the barrier, then stopped. She lowered her window. "Are you refusing access?" "I am maintaining the boundary while the claim is disputed. Your attorney has my attorney's number." Her eyes dropped toward the road. No surprises buried under there today. That landed exactly where she intended. No. I removed that equipment before anybody reached it, documented what I did, and gave the record to counsel. I will not make that mistake twice. For the first time, Denise looked disappointed instead of victorious. She lifted her phone and began recording me. Your own cameras prove this route has been used. They prove vehicles crossed it, I said. They also show crossings after my written notice, your contractors using it, and you continuing after we disputed permission. Historical rights do not disappear because you object. Then prove the right. I am done trying to settle that question with machinery. Denise shut off her engine but stayed behind the wheel. For nearly a minute, neither of us moved. Then she surprised me. Do you think I wanted this? She asked. Briar Glen has homeowners expecting me to solve an access problem without handing them a massive infrastructure bill. That connection has been treated as usable longer than I have been president. I believe that she believed it. That did not make my property the solution. Then solve Briar Glen's problem inside Briar Glen, or negotiate with me for something new. Do not manufacture permission by driving across my farm. Vanessa stepped closer to the boundary markers, not the SUV. Your constructed street ends there, she said, indicating the physical line we had already examined. Your drainage system ends there. Mason's maintained lane begins over here. Whatever lawyers decide about historical use, those facts do not merge themselves. Denise looked from Vanessa to the barrier, then toward the camera mounted above it. Her last advantage had always been provoking me into making her argument stronger. I had finally taken that away. She restarted the SUV. The engine idled while she stared down the dirt lane stretching through my farm. If she drove forward now, the cameras would preserve another deliberate crossing after notice, after negotiations failed, and after both sides had formally disputed the claimed right. If she backed away, Briar Glen would have to defend its claim without Denise creating another fact on the ground. Her hand moved to the gear selector. Denise shifted into reverse. Her SUV rolled backward from the barrier, slowly at first, then turned toward Briar Glen. I kept recording until she disappeared beyond the boundary. I did not celebrate. One smart decision could not erase the stupid one I had made 3 weeks earlier, and one retreat did not settle a property claim. The difference was that we finally had a record neither side could improve by performing beside a dirt road. Our attorneys handled what came next using the evidence already accumulated. The subdivision plat whose dedicated right-of-way stopped before our property, my family's maintenance invoices, the trail camera chronology, my written notice, Briar Glen's contractor and delivery use, the association communications, photographs of the gravel and drainage work, and the failed easement draft containing that phrase about historic authorized use. My spike strip incident stayed in the file too. I paid the legal expenses connected to that mistake, and the final agreement expressly prohibited concealed tire deflation devices on the disputed route. Briar Glen ultimately chose settlement rather than the expense and uncertainty of trying to establish broader historical access rights. The association withdrew its claim to routine vehicle access across our farm. I agreed not to pursue damages over the earlier crossings, and any future proposal for emergency access would have to begin as a new agreement, with surveying, compensation, maintenance responsibility, drainage terms, and whatever approvals were actually required. Briar Glen also had to address its access and drainage problem without simply treating my lane as the inexpensive extension of its own street. Denise lasted until the next board vote. Homeowners had learned that contractors and residents had been encouraged to use a connection the association had never secured while they were being told the route was effectively theirs. She lost the presidency, but she was not arrested, ruined, or transformed into some cartoon villain. She had tried to solve a real neighborhood problem by making my property part of the solution before obtaining the right to do it. A week after the settlement was signed, I hitched the box blade to my tractor and returned to the exact stretch of lane from the cold open. I cut away the shallow scar where I had once buried the spike strip, spread fresh gravel, and compacted it until the patch disappeared beneath the road. Vanessa checked the drainage grade while I finished. In the distance, Denise's silver SUV reached the Briar Glen junction. For a second, it seemed to pause facing my farm. Then it turned toward the subdivision's legitimate exit and vanished behind the trees. 3 weeks earlier, I had thought ownership meant having the power to stop her tires. Standing there on a road that was finally quiet again, I understood the better version of it. The spikes were gone. The boundary remained.